Let's head straight over now to Aaron Derfel, health reporter with the Montreal Gazette. He is on the line. Aaron, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Elias.
Looking at your latest piece in the Montreal Gazette, and here's the headline: the OQLF isn't disclosing the bilingual status of some Quebec hospitals. Why don't you tell us the story? Tell our listeners here, what's the story?
Okay, so Quebec's French language watchdog, the OQLF, must by law disclose a list on its website of municipalities, school boards, and health and social services institutions that are that have bilingual status. So, in the case of these hospitals, like the Montreal Chinese Hospital, the Polonais Nursing Home, and Santa Cabrini, they have bilingual status, but if you log on to the website of the OQLF, you won't find them there, and that something like 57. They're among 57 institutions that used to be listed a decade ago and that have simply vanished today.
And that's the interesting thing. You actually, in your story, you include a screen cap of the old website, right, from a decade ago, and where you see the list. I mean, it's a long list of all the institutions that had bilingual status. Now that's nowhere to be found. Looking into that situation, what have you found as to why that's happened?
So it's, I mean, you could interpret this charitably, or you could interpret it cynically. If you interpret it charitably, this could be the result of a 2015 reform to the Health and Social Services network by the former Liberal government, under which all these 57 health and social services institutions, they fell under the authority of these new regional health organizations, known by their abbreviations CIUS and CIS, and once they got swallowed up, they kind of fell by the wayside. That would be a charitable explanation. More cynical explanation is that this is an erosion of language rights, if you will, death by a thousand cuts, just making it that much harder for Anglophones, people who have moved to the province from elsewhere, and allophones, to know where they can get services in languages other than French. And it's not just English. Mm-hmm. In the case of Santa Cabrini, it's Italian. In the case of the Chinese hospital, obviously, would be Mandarin and, Polish, so many other languages.
Now, Aaron, as I see in your reporting, right, it's by law. The OQLF has to publish this list by law, right?
Yes. So if you look at the French language charter, I mean, the whole purpose is to protect the French language, but Anglophones, leaders in the Anglophone community fought hard to ensure that their rights be respected because under the Constitution. These are you have Anglophones who have lived here and contributed to, say, St. Mary's or the Jewish General. They built these institutions, so they fought hard to have that bilingual status. That's under Article 29.1. And then Article 29.4 requires the Office québécois de la langue française to publish the list. And so first of all, it's very, very hard to even find the list. Okay? Mm-hmm. But once you do find it, and then you just type in institutions in the health sector, up pops a dozen. And so you have the CIUS for the West Island, and you have the CIUS for Centre West, which includes Jewish General, and the West Island one includes St. Mary's. There's also the MUHC. But then again, these 57 other institutions, they've disappeared, and they're not just in the Montreal area, but across the province. And so this is, again, raising concerns by leaders in the Anglophone community of an intentional erosion of language rights and in covering, of all things, healthcare, mm-hmm. which is when we're talking about healthcare, language and communication, that's part and parcel of healthcare.
So, as you point out in your reporting, we're with Aaron Derfel from the Montreal Gazette talking about his recent piece on the bilingual status of Quebec hospitals and the OQLF not publishing that information. You point this out in your piece. There was a 2015 reform by the Liberal Party where this info left the website, correct?
Yes, but this is, that was not the goal of that reform. Its goal was to streamline, the bureaucracy. Under that reform, there were hundreds of middle managers who lost their jobs, and the idea was to centralize healthcare in Quebec. It wasn't. It didn't really deal with language per se. In fact, there were some provisions that were added in that reform to protect institutions that had bilingual status. What's happening here with the OQLF is that this is an agency that has its own team of bureaucrats and a budget of $30 million, and it could easily have updated the list. It wouldn't have been a huge challenge. But it decided not to do that. And when I asked them last week whether they would relist these institutions, they said, this is something that we might consider.
Now, Aaron, this is yet another story where, Anglophones have a reason to be concerned, right, about healthcare services in English. And I wonder if you see the connection between, the previous story about those language directives, the 31 pages of language directives, right, where in paper, black and white ink, we saw directives that said one thing, and then we had government people saying nothing's changed. In this instance, it's an omission, right? It's not that it's in black and white, it's that it's been removed. The line from the government again in this case is nothing's changed. So, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. If you see a connection here where either through printing something or omitting something, they're calling into question access to English services or bilingual services.
I mean, this is the reason I've been writing these stories is to hold the government and its agencies to account and to expose gaslighting by the government. In the case of the language directive, there's this requirement in black and white, to obtain to have an English eligibility certificate to be able to communicate exclusively in English. The certificate is impossible to obtain for adults. It's intended for school children and high school students. But the government, Jean-François Roberge, the language minister, is saying, we haven't changed anything, but they did change something because they added that to the directive that was issued by the health ministry in July. So all these various things, it suggests that there's a concerted action by the Coalition Avenir Quebec government to attack Anglophone institutions in Quebec. You recall last year the CAQ government raised tuition fees for out-of-province students for McGill and Concordia. And these universities are struggling with record drops in enrollment and massive deficits. And McGill is, considered one of the top universities internationally. Why is the CAQ government doing this? There are a lot of Francophones who are studying at McGill. I think the rationale here is that the CAQ government wants to ensure unilingualism, French unilingualism, under the French language charter. French is the official language. And it is anti-bilingual. In fact, one of the articles of Bill 96, it requires that institutions in the civil service do not make bilingualism a requirement to hire workers. So this is the direction that the CAQ government has been heading. We thought that healthcare was something sacred. You'll recall the former PQ Premier Lucien Bouchard in 1996. He said, when you go to a hospital, you deserve a blood test, but certainly not a language test. This is the one area that we thought that the government would not intrude upon, and yet it's intruding upon healthcare.
Just to wrap up here, Aaron, you did reach out to the Premier's office. What was the response on this issue?
It was just a terse one or two sentence response saying the status hasn't changed. Contact the OQLF.
Okay, Aaron, listen, I'll direct everyone to your excellent reporting in the Montreal Gazette. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Aaron Derfel, health reporter with the Montreal Gazette.